The photograph was taken in 1882, somewhere in the American South. A black family, formal and dignified, dressed in their finest clothes, posed inside a photography studio. At first glance, it resembled countless other portraits from that era, moment frozen in time, a family proud enough to pay to be remembered. But look closer. One member, a young girl standing at the edge of the frame, had something in her eyes that went unnoticed for over 140 years. When a genetic historian examined the photograph under digital magnification, it left him silent. What he found was not just a physical trait, was a biological key encoded in her DNA, one that had survived slavery, erasure, and generations of silence, and was about to reveal the true origin of a family whose history had been deliberately erased. This is the story hidden in that little girl's eyes. Dr. James Okafor had spent 15 years reconstructing lost genealogies at his office in Howard University, Washington, D.C. His walls were lined with framed photographs not of his family, but of strangers whose names had been erased and stories swallowed by history. Each frame represented a case he had solved, a life reclaimed. One rainy morning, Diane walked in. She was in her early 50s, wearing a gray coat, carrying a flat cardboard envelope close to her chest. "My grandmother left it to me," she said, placing it on his desk, and her grandmother had left it to her. Nobody knew who these people were, not their names, not where they came from, nothing. James opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a photograph about 8 by 10 inches, mounted on thick cardboard, a cabinet card, the standard portrait format of the 1880s. It was in remarkable condition, edges browned and slightly warped, but the image sharp and clear. A family of 7 posed in what appeared to be a studio, with a painted garden backdrop, a common affectation of the time. The father stood at the center, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit and tie, his expression composed, almost severe. Beside him, the mother sat in a high-collared blouse, hands folded in her lap. 5 children were arranged around them, 2 older boys on the left, 2 younger girls seated in front, and the youngest girl, perhaps 7 or 8, standing slightly apart at the far right. Faded ink at the bottom read October 14, 1882. No names, no location, no studio stamp, only a faint rectangular ghost where one had been removed. James studied the photograph, then picked up his magnifying glass. "Has anyone ever looked at this closely?" he asked. Diane shook her head. "Not really. We always assumed it was just a portrait." As James examined it methodically, noting clothing styles, furniture, paper quality, he saw something unusual in the youngest girl. Her face turned slightly toward the camera, showing both eyes. The left eye was dark brown, typical for a black child of that era. The right eye, however, was noticeably lighter, a pale gray, that stood out even in the sepia tones. James set the magnifying glass down and used a digital scanner to capture a high-resolution image. He enhanced it on his monitor, adjusting contrast and focus without altering the original. When he zoomed in on the girl's face, the right eye revealed itself clearly. Blue-gray, a black child in 1882, with one brown eye and one blue-gray eye. He turned to Diane. "Tell me everything you know about this family." Diane knew very little. The photograph had been passed down through 4 generations of women with the same instruction: keep it. But no one had names, letters, documents, or oral history to explain it. Her great-great-grandmother had received it from someone she called the old woman, who told her not to lose it. James pulled up a medical reference database, looking for genetic information. Waardenburg syndrome, type 2A, autosomal dominant inheritance pattern. He read the entry carefully: a genetic condition affecting pigmentation of hair, skin, and eyes. Its most distinctive features included heterochromia, iris eyes of different colors, or one iris with 2 colors and a white forelock. Mutations in genes such as PAX3, MITF, or EDNRB affect melanocyte development and migration, the cells responsible for pigmentation. Have you ever looked at an old photograph and wondered about the hidden stories within it? For historian James, an 1882 photo of a black family became an obsession. It wasn't just a portrait, it was a puzzle stretching back through generations. It all started with the eyes of a little girl. While examining a high-resolution scan, James noticed something remarkable. One of the youngest children, a little girl, had one dark eye and one strikingly pale one. He suspected it was a genetic condition called Waardenburg syndrome. He knew this condition was autosomal dominant, meaning it's passed down directly from a parent and doesn't skip generations. If this little girl had it, one of her parents must have had it too. This single clue was an unbroken biological thread, a fingerprint, stretching back in time. He scanned the other family members. The 2 older boys, and the father, had uniformly dark eyes. But then he saw it. The girl's slightly older sister, who at first glance seemed unaffected, had a small patch of bright white hair just above her temple, a white forelock, another classic sign of Waardenburg syndrome. The same gene, showing up in 2 different ways in 2 sisters. Now, who was the carrier? The mother's face was partially obscured by a shadow, her right eye hidden. James called in a genetics expert, Dr. Patricia Ewan. The next morning, she looked at the enhanced image and immediately knew. "The shadow isn't hiding the eyes," she said, "it's hiding the hair." James adjusted the contrast, and there it was, at the edge of the shadow, a sliver of lighter hair on the mother, matching her daughter's white forelock. She was the one. With this genetic marker, James turned to the historical records. He dove into the Freedmen's Bureau archives, created after the Civil War to document formerly enslaved people. He searched for any woman with a physical description matching the condition. After hours of searching, a record popped up. A labor contract from 1866 in South Carolina for a woman named Eliza. And next to her name, a note from the bureau agent, "One eye brown, one eye gray blue." Distinctive. He had found her. A name, a place, and a date. The trail now led him to an even darker part of history. Slave manifests. These brutal shipping records listed enslaved people like cargo, noting their physical descriptions. He began searching these digitized collections for Eliza, for a woman with distinctive eyes, hoping to trace this family's incredible story of survival and legacy even further back. A story written not just in ink, but in their very DNA. What he would uncover next would change everything. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the conclusion to this incredible journey. Thanks for watching. Have you ever wondered about the stories hidden in your own family tree? Where do you truly come from? For one woman named Eliza, these weren't just casual questions. They were the key to unlocking a past that had been lost for generations. This is the incredible story of a journey that spanned continents. From the United States all the way back to a small village in Sierra Leone, Eliza grew up knowing she was different. Her family's oral history spoke of an ancestor, a young girl captured and taken away on a ship long ago. But the details were foggy, lost to time like a faded photograph. Who was this girl? What was her name? What was her life like before everything changed? These questions haunted Eliza. She felt a piece of her identity was missing, a connection to a homeland she'd never known. Driven by this deep yearning, she decided to do something about it. She wasn't just looking for a name in a history book. She was searching for her roots, for a sense of belonging. The journey wasn't easy. It began with countless hours of research, digging through dusty archives, deciphering old ship manifests, and piecing together fragmented records. It was like a giant, historical puzzle with most of the pieces missing. Many times, she hit a dead end and felt like giving up. But the image of that long-lost ancestor kept pushing her forward. She collaborated with historians and genealogists who were fascinated by her quest. Together, they followed a faint trail of clues, a breadcrumb path leading them across the Atlantic. The breakthrough came from a single, overlooked document, a slave arrest record that mentioned a young girl with a specific name from a particular region in Sierra Leone. Could this be her? With this new lead, Eliza knew she had to go there herself. The flight to Sierra Leone was filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. What would she find? Would people even know what she was talking about? When she arrived, the sights, sounds, and smells were a world away from everything she knew. Yet there was a strange, undeniable feeling of coming home. Guided by local historians, she traveled to a remote village, the very one mentioned in the records. When she arrived, she shared her story with the village elders. As she spoke, she watched their faces change from curiosity to stunned recognition. The elders began to share their own oral traditions, stories passed down through generations. They spoke of a young girl, with the same name, who had been tragically taken from their village centuries ago. They had never forgotten her. They had kept her memory alive through songs and stories, always hoping that one day, her descendants would find their way back. In that moment, standing in that village, surrounded by people who shared her history, Eliza finally understood. She found her ancestor's name, her story, and in doing so, she found a part of herself. She was welcomed, not as a stranger, but as a long-lost daughter of the village. The emotional reunion was something out of a movie, filled with tears, celebration, and a profound sense of connection. Eliza's journey wasn't just about finding the past. It was about reclaiming it and building a bridge to the future. This powerful story reminds us that our history is a vital part of who we are. It shapes our identity and connects us to something much larger than ourselves. Thank you for watching this incredible journey unfold. If you were moved by Eliza's story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing human stories from around the world. We'll see you next time. She had survived the crossing. She had survived enslavement. She had raised children and grandchildren on land that was not her own, and she had carried in her irises, in her children's hair, in the DNA of every descendant that followed, an unbroken biological record of where she came from. James thought of the little girl in the photograph standing apart at the far right of the frame, face turned slightly toward the camera, one eye dark, one eye pale, 7-year-old in 1882, who had no way of knowing that what made her different would 140 years later lead a historian to her great-great-grandmother's river. He considered what it meant to carry something in your body that cannot be seen, felt, or named, something that outlasts ships, auctions, ledgers, and silence. He sat with that thought for a long time before preparing what he would tell Diane the following morning. 6 weeks after she first arrived with the photograph pressed to her chest in the rain, Diane returned to James' office on a Thursday morning in October. She sat across from him at the same desk. The photograph lay between them, still in its cardboard envelope, still preserved with the care of 4 generations of women. James laid out the evidence in order: the Freedmen's Bureau record, the labor contract, Patricia's DNA analysis, the letter from the Amistad Research Center, the historical maps, the Mende people of the Sewer River Valley in Sierra Leone. Each document formed a step in a staircase leading one generation at a time from a photography studio in South Carolina in 1882 to a village on a West African riverbank in the 1830s. Diane listened without interrupting. She examined each document, held a printed copy of the letter, the original too fragile to handle, and read the passage about the mismatched eyes twice. When James finished, she studied the photograph for a long time. "The little girl," Diane said quietly. "She didn't know what her eyes meant." "No," James said. "She couldn't have. But her great-great-grandmother knew. She wrote it down." Diane looked up. She wanted someone to know. "She did," James said. "You found it. It just took 140 years. Diane picked up the photograph and studied the girl at the edge of the frame, the one who had moved slightly before the shutter closed, whose pale right eye had caught the studio light in a way no one had noticed for 150 years. The family had no recorded name. Their story had been deliberately erased, first by slavery, then by history's indifference. But the erasure was never complete. Embedded in the biology of that child, within the cells of her iris, in the genes passed from mother to daughter, from the woman taken from the banks of a river in Sierra Leone, was a record no document could destroy. Diane set the photograph down and was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Her name was Eliza, but somewhere on the Suar River, she had another name. Now I know where to look for it." She tucked the photograph back into its cardboard envelope and held it to her chest, arms wrapped around it the same way she had carried it into the office 6 weeks before. DNA does not forget. It cannot be confiscated, burned, or renamed. It simply waits. And sometimes, after long enough, someone finally knows how to read it.